Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to be talking about Christian persecution in the West, or the lack thereof, and why that is. Whenever someone talks about Christian persecution, it is often assumed that all the real persecution is happening in places like communist China, or parts of the Muslim world that do in fact kill Christians. Considering that these atrocities are happening in other parts of the world, how is it that professing Christians in the Western world are able to escape any form of genuine Christian persecution that true followers have endured for Christ throughout the centuries? Jesus taught that if we actually follow, not just believe in him, we would be hated by all for his name's sake. He also told us that if they called him a demon, they would do exactly the same thing to those of us who have become his followers. Even the Apostle Paul said that everyone who wants to live a godly life, i.e. follow Christ, will suffer persecution. So where is all the persecution happening to Christians in places like the US? In our experience of talking with countless professing Christians in the West, most of them cannot even imagine facing any type of persecution for their religious beliefs or church attendance. Quite the contrary, they believe that accepting Jesus in their hearts makes them more respected by the rest of the world. They want to be seen as nice people and not offend anyone with some of the harder truths that Jesus taught us, if they are aware of his teachings at all. Sure, there are always a handful of people or so-called Christian groups who feel they suffer persecution for their opposition to gays or atheists or whatever. But are these individuals or groups really being persecuted for sharing the actual teachings of Jesus? Or are they more often being ridiculed by the secular world for expressing certain pet doctrines that really don't have anything to do with Jesus' teachings recorded in the Gospels? So what is it in the teachings of Jesus that would actually bring about persecution? If our job as Christians was just to go around saying God loves you or Jesus died for you, then it would make sense that this wouldn't really enrage most people to the point of hating us. But is this really all that it means to preach the gospel that Christ came to teach us? Part of what the gospel seems to be communicating are two major points which we have addressed in our other videos: forsaking all and working for God or love instead of money, both of which are practical applications of the core of the gospel, which is loving your neighbor as yourself. Firstly, Jesus says that in order to become his disciple, we must sell our possessions, give the proceeds to the poor, and follow his other teachings. Here you can see that Jesus commands all of his would-be followers on numerous occasions to forsake all. Secondly, Jesus presents his followers with an ultimatum: God or money. Again, it is crystal clear that Jesus asks more of his followers than to simply say a prayer and ask him into their hearts. These key teachings are understandably foreign to most professing Christians because they are largely ignored by the churches. It is this ignorance that saves most Christians from the persecution that Christ himself faced for the same teachings. We can confidently say from many years of experience that these particular teachings of Jesus have created so much opposition from nearly every professing Christian or church that we come into contact with that we must have hit on a sore spot that would cause us to face such intense persecution. Although it might seem to some that we are just preaching a one-point sermon over and over again on this channel with regard to forsaking all that we own and to stop working for money and begin working for love instead, we see it as one of the most important and most ignored parts of the gospel. This seems to be an ingredient in the teachings of Jesus that is the cause of persecution. We are not promoting some vague system of beliefs that defines what most people these days think of as being a Christian. We are not advocating attendance to some particular church. What we are radically committed to is sharing the teachings of Jesus with the world, and it is those very teachings that led to the execution of Jesus and the persecution and deaths of his genuine followers throughout the centuries. In the Gospels, Jesus clearly warns everyone who wants to become his disciple that they must pick up their own cross and be willing to lose their lives for his sake. To our modern ears, this just sounds like some horribly mistaken exaggeration on Jesus' part. We look around the church world today in the West and can't imagine any of those friendly, smiling church folks facing persecution. And for good reason. The fact is simply that they don't usually have the knowledge of the teachings of Jesus, let alone any experience of practicing those teachings themselves. So without applying his teachings to your life, you can never understand why Jesus would give us such explicit warnings about being persecuted. But once you do try to apply his teachings, watch out for some very fierce opposition. We have personally experienced much persecution that stems directly from our deep loyalty to Jesus' gospel. While it has been hard to accept sometimes, it has only served to strengthen our faith by bearing witness to the truth of Christ's claims that we will be on the receiving end of hostility from a world that is united in rejecting nearly everything that Jesus taught. Thanks for stopping by and checking out our video. Don't forget to check out our other videos and subscribe before you leave.